Hi, this is my March TBR, and it's already March when I'm filming this, but I'm apparently just incapable of doing anything on time. Also, my city is flooded, so... This month I'm going to be participating in a readathon hosted by Mel from a book fiend named Mel, based around her TBR game Roll of Reads. As with most months, my TBR is heavily influenced by what I have due back at the library, but this year I am also trying to prioritize getting a number of my own TBR books on each month. That does mean that I started with a hefty stack of books in my head that I knew that I really wanted to get to in March. So traditionally you would use one of the smaller dice to determine how many rolls you have to do, but I just couldn't risk having too few rolls. So I let a Twitter poll pick my number of rolls, which ended up being 15. When you think about it, is actually a lot of opportunities to roll either a 1 or a number 3 times, which are both conditions that add extra rolls. So that could go very bad. So let's go through my rolls. First of all, I rolled a 10 and got the prompt Australian author, which is excellent. This was definitely a prompt that I was hoping for because I had a number of books by Aussie authors I wanted to get to in March. For this, I'm going to be reading the poetry collection Heartbeats by Candy Royalle. She was an Australian poet and performance artist who sadly passed away in 2018. My friend Ray recommended Candy Royalle's work to me because I'm a huge fan of Roya Marsh, and I'm also just inclined to trust Ray's judgment on such things because they're also a great poet. For roll 2, I rolled a 4, which turned out to be partner pick, which is fine. It's totally fine. And here we have the first unforeseen addition to my TBR. When I told my partner Adrian that I'd gotten this prompt before I could even finish listing the potential ways we could do this with maybe him picking from my priorities for this month or from my library or owned TBRs, he had already leapt up and grabbed a book off our big shared bookcase in the lounge room, which is honestly really impressive because it's not organized at all and it's actually just a complete nightmare to find things on. So kudos to him for finding a book so quickly. He did grab Drachenfels by Kim Newman, writing under the pen name Jack Yoevil, and this is licensed Warhammer fiction. Now, to be fair, this does seem to be widely acknowledged as one of the best tie-in novels of the Warhammer franchise, and also just in general. I know almost nothing about the Warhammer universe, but apparently I don't have to, so we're doing this. For roll 3, I rolled a 5 and got incorporate another readathon prompt, which is a very kind prompt for Mel to include. I'm trying not to overload myself with readathons this year, so Roll of Reads is the main readathon I'm doing in March, but I'm also participating in some longer year/yearish long readathons, including Buzzwordathon, Invisible Cities, and Pondathon II. For this, I've decided to use the current side quest secret achievement for Pondathon, which is to read a book by a black woman or a non-binary femme-aligned author. So for that, I'll be reading Twisted, The Tangled History of Black Hair Culture by Emma Dabiri, which I believe was first published under the title Don't Touch My Hair. I'll be listening to the audiobook for this one, as that's one of my favorite ways to consume nonfiction, especially when it's read by the author. So for my 4th roll, I rolled a 16 and got the prompt Nostalgic Vibes, which Mel has left fairly open to interpretation in the prompt explanation. But I've decided to use this slot in my Sookie Stackhouse reread for the month, which is Club Dead by Charlaine Harris, obviously. I'm participating in the Sookie Stackhouse Readalong that's being hosted by Deirdre from Shade Tree Reads and Bree from Locked Booktition, and it's been giving me cozy, nostalgic feelings because this series is an old comfort read for me. If you're not familiar, this is the book series the show True Blood is based on. Club Dead is book 3, so I don't want to go too far into plot stuff, but this is an urban fantasy paranormal romance series centering on Sookie, a young woman from northern Louisiana who gets more and more entangled with the supernatural community through mystery solving and dating, starting with a really boring vampire. For roll 5, I rolled an 11 and the prompt was non-fiction. So for this, I'll be using one of the books I wanted to read for this month's Buzzword, which is Location. Annie Proulx is one of my favorite authors, and Bird Cloud is the name she gave the property where she built her house. Bird Cloud is her memoir about the design and construction of the house and the natural history of the land that it's on. I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of cool Wyoming descriptions and history, and I'm extremely keen because primarily through Annie Proulx's work, Wyoming is one of the US states I have a weird fascination and affection for. The others are Minnesota and West Virginia, if you were curious, though you probably weren't. But feel free to recommend me books set in any of those 3 states. I've actually had this book since it came out in 2011. My copy is signed. I never got around to reading it because though the event where I got to go with my mom and Adrian to see Annie Proulx speak, then get the book signed, was an amazing experience, I had a really shitty experience later that night, which has made it hard for me to actually pick up the book because of the associated bad memories. But we're doing it over a decade later. For roll 6, I rolled a 6 and got the prompt for LGBTQIA+ rep. And for that, I'm going to be reading Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. It's a classic of queer literature about an American man living in Paris and the relationships that he's had with men, in particular Giovanni. The protagonist is bisexual and dealing with a lot of internalized homophobia and what masculinity means to him. Baldwin himself, obviously, was also an out gay man, so I feel like we've really got the LGBTQIA+ rep thoroughly covered here. And I'm also keen to read this because my library only has 1 copy for some reason, and I spent a year and a half in the holds queue. Why didn't I just buy my own copy? I don't know. For roll 7, I rolled an 8 and got one of the prompts I was tempted to lose the card for before I started playing, which was mentioned in the Gilmore Girls. I have never watched Gilmore Girls, so I don't have any kind of attachment to the show in that way. And while the list of potential books is pretty long, the ones I hadn't read but planned to, I wasn't necessarily feeling right now. And there are also some real stinkers on there, which made me kind of mistrustful of the list. But on my 2nd or 3rd scroll through, I thought of a workaround. So I don't know if this is cheating, but Slaughterhouse-Five by Vonnegut is one of my favorite books. And I bought but haven't yet read the graphic novel adaptation done by Ryan North and Albert Monteys. So I'm going to be reading that to fulfill this prompt. I hope that still works. Okay, so for roll 8, I rolled an 18, which got me Set Somewhere You've Been, wherein I frustrated myself with checking the exact settings of Australian books I wanted to read to see if any of them count, and none of them were quite a match, and I ended up going with an even vaguer connection, but yeah. I'm going to read Blood on the Tracks Volume 7 by Oshimi Shūzō. This is a psychological suspense horror manga that I've been loving and keen to pick up the next installment of. I don't actually remember where in Japan it's set, or if that's even explicitly stated, but I have been to Japan, and it's much smaller than Australia, so probably close enough, right? This series makes me so anxious, and the way it uses silence to creep through you is absolutely masterful. For roll 9, I rolled a 19 and got the prompt main character over 30, which I think is a cool prompt because I am also over 30, in case you couldn't tell from how haggard I look. For this, I decided to lean into the spirit of the prompt and read a book about characters from an underrepresented demographic. So I'll be reading Mums by Ma Yeong-shin, translated from the Korean by Janet Hong. This graphic novel is about 3 mothers in their mid-50s, and I've heard it's very funny, and it's described as an unfiltered story of a group of middle-aged mums who yearn for something more than the mediocre men in their lives can provide. And that sounds great. For roll 10, again, why did I do so many rolls? I rolled a 12 and got the prompt to join an online book club. I'm already part of a couple, and for this I'm going to be reading Too Much Lip by Melissa Lucashenko, which, as well as being the March book for the Vintage Books and Wine Club, is one I've been meaning to get to for a while. This has the beloved trope of a protagonist returning to her hometown for what she thinks is only going to be a brief visit, but then shit unfolds. For roll 11, I immediately rolled another 12, which made me nervous because if you roll the same number 3 times, you have to add a roll. But that's only twice, not 3 times. So it's fine. But this got me the prompt featuring a magical or mythical creature. And now, because Mel specified in the prompts that you could use an Australian animal for this, since they've achieved semi-mythic status, I decided to kind of do both. So for that, I'm going to be reading Carpentaria by Alexis Wright, which, as well as being an absolute chonker, has a picture of the Rainbow Serpent on the cover. The Rainbow Serpent is a deity who features in a number of different creation stories for various Indigenous Australian peoples. So this is an animal from Australian myths. So it's both. The book follows the conflicts of people in a small town in the Gulf of Carpentaria. That's the big scooped out part at the top of Australia for any non-Aussies. And this also means I unintentionally have 2 Miles Franklin Award winners, no relation, on this TBR, and I'm not upset about it. For roll 12, I got a 5, which is another double, but not a triple yet, so no need to panic. For this, I need to read a gifted book, which I don't actually get a lot of books as gifts that often, except for my other partner Chris, who has given me a number of like wonderful non-fiction titles that I just don't feel up to braining for right now. But the lovely April from Aprilius Maximus recently sent me a care package of books while I had COVID in January, so I'm reading one of those. So thank you, April. I'll be reading The Loneliest Girl in the Universe by Lauren James. I've heard good things about this one, though I think I might have gotten spoiled for it at some point. My memory is shit, so I don't generally worry about spoilers too much. I am very keen to read this one though. It's set in space, right? Roll 13, I rolled a crit. Because this game is based around a d20, there is a reward for if you roll a 20 or a critical hit, and that means it can basically be used as a wild card. You can follow the prompt or a mood read. The prompt that was in the 20 slot was a mood read. So yeah, I guess I will do that. I have plenty of other things that I didn't fit onto this TBR that I want to read in March. In particular, for Invisible Cities, the March countries are the Dominican Republic and Norway. I'll be trying to read Tentacle by Rita Indiana, translated from the Spanish by Archie Obejas, which is set in like a post-apocalyptic Santo Domingo, and You Let Me In by Camilla Bruce, who is Norwegian, but I'm not 100% sure if the book itself is set there. For roll 14, I rolled an 11, which is another double, but still not a triple. I got the prompt to randomize a genre pick, and I popped some of the main genres I wanted to get to on my TBR this month into a spinny wheel app, and it gave me contemporary. For that, I'm going to be reading Intimacies by Katie Kitamura, which I don't know that much about going in, except that it's literary fiction with a contemporary setting, specifically set in The Hague, where the protagonist takes a job as a translator at the International Court, and it has been getting all sorts of praise. And roll 15 is actually my last roll, because I rolled a 13, so no extra rolls for me. This prompt was favorite author's first book, which is a prompt I really like, but I had a bit of trouble deciding who to go with because I have a number of authors who I would consider my favorite. I know Ellie from Earl Grey Books is reading An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon this month, and I do want to do a reread, but I've been doing a lot of rereading lately, so I decided I wanted to go with something I hadn't read before. So I'll be reading The Fisher of Bones by Sarah Gailey, because I really want to get to their backlist, and this seems like a great way to get to that. This is a fantasy novella. I don't know that much going in because it's so short, but I assume it has some weirdness and maybe horror elements, because Sarah Gailey works within that slipstream genre zone a lot of the time. So those are the books on my March Roll of Reads TBR. There are a few more I didn't get onto here, but I will hopefully be reading throughout the month. This is probably already a million years long, so bye. Come here. Come here.